Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Bengal Tiger Podcast. I'm Matthew Brune, and joining me once again is Shea Dixon. Shea, how you doing on this
Yo,
Wednesday afternoon?
I'm doing well. Went to Brian Kelly's press conference. It's signing day, which is wild. It is the first Wednesday in February, but the early signing period initially kind of took the fun out of it. Still, some guys signed today, but now I think we're almost officially to that point, Matty B, where people forget that the first Wednesday in February is signing day. LSU signed nobody today. Their entire high school class signed in December, and then the shift and focus turned to the portal. So we figured, why not do a National Signing Day Portal Pod edition?
Yeah.
Given that's what Brian Kelly's whole press conference today was about, was pretty much some new hires that he's made off the field, notably on the field. Alex Atkins coming from Florida State is the new tight ends coach at LSU, but mostly about portal, which
Yeah.
we've been knee deep in. Matty B, it feels like what, since December like 8th or
Jeez.
something.
Yeah.
So
Right.
2 months of
Yeah.
nonstop portal.
Oh, wow. The only thing I will say for the recruiting class is I'll plug my story, which I thought was cool, of the On3's NFL comps for the LSU recruiting class. They do like the top 50 or so, and LSU has four of them: DJ Pickett, Harlem Berry, Carius Kern, and Solomon Thomas. All have some interesting NFL comps from On3 that I thought were interesting. So I will plug that before we get into the portal.
Yeah, it's only $1. We've had a lot of new signups recently, so shout out to all the new members. But yes, $1 to get on the Bengal Tiger, and we're on the message board a ton, obviously, but also access to the entire On3 network. So you can go read every site, all the national stuff from Steve Wiltfong, Andy Staples, all the guys. So Matty B, I don't know how many times we've written about a ton about the portal. You pimped your signing day piece of highlighting the top guys in the class. I'm glad that you thought it was cool. Now people will definitely read it because
I had to.
at least you thought it was cool.
Yes.
What was the final 5-star Harlem Berry #1 running back comp?
It ended up being
Because it
Reggie.
started Jamal
It was
Charles.
Jamal Charles to maybe Jahmyr Gibbs a little bit, and then now it's full Reggie Bush. So we're just completely in on Harlem Berry here at On3.
Yeah. And Frank Wilson signs the #1 and #7 running backs in the country,
Mm-hmm.
JT Lindsay being the other coming out of Ash, and then Harlem coming out of St. Martin's. So 2 top 7 running backs, both Louisiana guys, but also the only school to sign 2 guys in the top 10. So Frank doing Frank things per normal there. And we'll see how they mix in. Caden Durham, obviously, will be the lead back.
Yep.
And then those guys, Caleb Jackson, we'll see what the spring and summer holds for him. But today's pod, we wanted to put the focus on the portal. I asked,
Go ahead.
you did your rankings and pull them up so that
All
we
right.
can
Let me
reference
find
it
them.
because you had your personal rankings already. And that included everyone, I think, to that.
No, yeah, it didn't include the last two, which was Donovan Green and Tamarcus Cooley.
Okay, well, you can mix them in there then for
Yeah.
this point of this conversation.
Yeah.
But I asked Brian Kelly so far, look, and they got to what, they're not practicing, but they're doing workouts. They run around and then they'll on their own, go out there and do reps and everything that their position coaches want them to work on. And, head coaches obviously get a glimpse into it and hear how the guys look. And Brian Kelly had the same answer. He talked about Bauer Sharp, who is the tight end. And I've had a couple of people say, hey, look, Bauer Sharp is better than people think he is.
Mm-hmm.
Is he a Mason Taylor? I don't know. But he's a big guy. He's got experience in the SEC. And they think he'll catch a good number of passes this year. And we know that Nuss loves the tight ends.
Yeah.
You mentioned Donovan Green coming from A&M was the other tight end they signed. And then he said Jack Pyburn, and that doesn't shock me because a number of people have said Jack Pyburn. I almost think that, and for people not familiar, he played at Florida this past season. When they put him in the starting lineup, Florida's defense got a lot better.
He had like 60 tackles almost on the year.
He plays that edge spot, and he's very, I think he's kind of like viewed as in that light of like the Whit Weeks of they were like, Brian Kelly was like in the workout room to feel like everything is leader, hype, brings that energy. I've asked a number of sources about him, and they all say, look, his film is exactly who he is. Just kind of you just grind it out, nasty football player. I think he'll play a good bit. But the guy you talked about most was the guy that you've been high on. When I asked a couple of sources I trusted most, they both put him at number one. And I did get a confirmation on how we pronounce his name. It's Delane. So Mansour Delane,
The lane.
coming out of Virginia Tech. And we've sat around and debated, would he play some corners, some nickel? Like, how would it go? And Brian Kelly's basically said he's been the de facto leader now that Zy Alexander's graduated and gone. Of He's the guy that's got 30 plus college games played. He's the guy who's got 150 something career tackles. And you look around the room, and it is a lot of younger guys. Even the crew of PJ Woodlands and Stamps, they're still younger compared to a guy like Delane. So
I mean, he might be the only one. Well, Stamps has starts too, but outside of Stamps, he's the only one that has more than 2 starts in his career.
that's wild to think about. Yeah, because Jakeem Jackson, you kind of view as experienced. He had the starts, then he got injured, and then coming out of Florida. But that was a guy Corey Raymond loved in high school and signed at Florida, and now has here. Pickett, number one corner. Yeah, now that you say that, it feels like, and then you get Woodland back, Stamps, all those guys. It feels like the room is definitely better, but certainly not more experienced, which is why when you say that out loud,
it's a
he's the only
talent.
one with more than 2 starts. I realize why Brian Kelly would quickly say, hey, look,
Yeah.
this guy here with 30 something starts is making this room a lot better.
Yeah, the floor for Delane is so high. I think no matter where, if it's corner, safety, nickel, star, I don't care where he plays, he's going to be on the field and he's going to impact winning for this team. Like, that is a bold statement that I think is going to be a fact this year. The question becomes, Jakeem Jackson and DJ Pickett, both guys who, Jakeem Jackson, top 40 player, DJ Pickett, who's the number one corner in the class. Like, those are guys with the top end talent that you're like, all right, they could be, if everything works out, NFL players in 2 years and 3 years. So that's where, as Corey Raymond, you add Delane to shore up the room. You already know you have Stamps as well, who is a capable guy. Woodland's a capable guy. So you have these players that, at the very least, raise your floor. And then you're like, all right, DJ and Jakeem could take off and separate themselves, in theory, in 7 months to be like, hey, these guys are elite cornerbacks. And I think there's still a ways to go for both of them. Like I said, Jakeem coming off the injury, DJ being a true freshman. We'll see how it plays out, but I feel good that knowing that Delane at the very least is going to be an impact player on this team. If it's corner, safety, nickel, star, I don't care where.
Is how much better, because I think significantly, is the DB room now, and we'll have to see what if they take more safeties, kind of how that unfolds. But you've moved Toviano to safety. You've got Jordan Gilbert back. You add Tamarcus Cooley out of NC State, who is considered, I think he was the best available safety in the portal when he came off the board to LSU. And then we just talked about Delane and Jackson coming from UF. With Pickett as well, and guys like, how much is this room better than it was a year ago? I think yes. I think the big question is how much better, because, and then you'll have to ask that same question at safety, because let's be real, like, there's been deficiencies in the Kelly era, but the one spot they've struggled at consistently, it seems, is DB, with a lack of guys there, minus when some transfers kind of bailed them out of spots in year one.
Yeah. I was going to say, that first year, I was talking to someone on the board about it. It was like that 2022 year, the transfer
They had
conversion rate.
Garner and Converse in them.
Garner, Converse, Brooks, Fuchsia.
Oh, that's right. Both Arkansas.
You go down the list of even beyond them. I think the transfer portal additions like Micaiah Wingo, obviously, go down the list, Miles Frazier and so on. So that Jaden Daniels, that transfer portal class, it was incredible. And so now you hope you can replicate that with this group. But I think looking at the secondary in particular, I just think like Zy Alexander at corner was very, very good. And I think from a execution standpoint and from like a veteran standpoint, like that is hard to replace. Again, it goes back to, can DJ and Jakeem surpass Zy maybe in terms of like just talent, right? And athleticism and speed. Like those traits that they have are special. And so that's what you hope separates themselves over the next 6-7 months. At safety, I think it's interesting. I mean, Tamarcus Cooley, I think is a baller, real playmaker in the back end, can help in the run game as well. I look at him as a better version of Sage Ryan. And then, you kind of that other safety spot, we'll have to see how it plays out with hopefully a better version of Jordan Gilbert with Deshaun Spears another year, Javian Toviano coming back. So I just think when you look at those four positions, without even looking at like a star or nickel or whatever, those four spots, they're just in a much better position just in the two deep alone than they were last year. Because last year, I mean, we're looking at like a Jordan Allen, we're looking at, Woodland, like we talked about and stuff, as like fighting for starting jobs, and we just didn't know. This year, I think you look at the talent and say, okay, no matter how it shakes out, I feel good with these positions here. I think that's fair to say.
No, 100%. I think they'll be better. I'm with you. I do think, though, that DJ Pickett's just going to have to learn on the fly, right?
Yeah.
Like it's one of those things where whatever lumps he's taken, they consider worth it because that's how quickly he progresses and kind of you squeeze as much out of the 3 years that you expect him to be here, right? Like you don't want him sitting the bench this year. So that'll be an interesting thing to look. They're all on campus, so we'll see them in spring. We don't have to wait until fall camp to watch that unfold. Any quick thoughts on the two? I mean, he mentioned Bauer Sharp and Pyburn as two who
Yep.
he thought early on had impressed him, and Pyburn doesn't shock me.
No.
Sharp, I had heard that from a couple of other people I had asked who looks good early on, and they're like, Bauer Sharp's going to be a lot better than people think.
Yeah. Sharp, obviously, for those who don't know, was the leading receiver at Oklahoma last year because of all.
And look, more power to Bauer Sharp, but
Yes.
like 300 yards got you the leading receiver at Oklahoma last year.
Yeah, that was a mess of a season. As we know, I mean, Nick Anderson missed the whole year. Now he's at LSU. Like
right.
that is, if you
They had
have
like
Nick Anderson,
8 receivers out at one time. Like
yeah, like 5, like Burks, all these guys were out for Oklahoma. Regardless, we know I think the sure hands, and honestly, he was kind of used pretty in a lot of like versatile situations there. He's a really good athlete. For his size, we'll see how like the blocking comes along and the physicality. We'll talk about Alex Atkins being the tight ends coach moving forward, but I think Sharp, at the very least, gives you a really good compliment to Trey'Dez Green at the tight end spot. So then you go to Pyburn, who I had him Pyburn, I think like 9th on my transfer rankings, which might seem low, but this class is so good. Like 9th is actually really solid. Like he could be a starter for them, and I think he addresses a key spot, which is their run defense. Like Jack Pyburn is a run stopping defensive end. He's not. I don't even know if he had a sack last year off the top of my head, but
and he
like,
plays standing up on that edge a good
yeah, he
bit.
could play outside linebacker type stuff, and just he has a great nose for the ball. So I like Jack Pyburn to get a significant amount of tackles. I don't know if he'll get 60 this year, but he'll put up plenty of tackles.
I do want to say, and look, they addressed a lot of positions, and Brian Kelly summed it up. I thought sort of how I feel about it is they went out and I said, look, you said in December y'all were going to be aggressive in the portal. In November, it's kind of the end of the season. Then they go out and get one of the best classes, like double-digit guys, a lot that are going to start, many that are going to play a lot next year. And you couple that with, like, I don't think people are talking, nobody's talking that Harold Perkins will be healthy again and on this team next year. People, if Nussmeier were in the portal, that would have been the biggest name in the portal. There weren't a ton of like Cam Wards and all those guys this cycle. Getting him back, getting so many other guys back, the high school signees, we've already talked about guys like Pickett, Harlem Berry, like they'll be early in, impact guys who are ranked number 1 at their position. And Kelly said, we think we took it basically from the team we had last year with what we did in retention to high school to portal to a national championship type contender. And I think that's like right now, Vegas, we got into a conversation on the board about this, has 8.5 win total. I think that the floor for this team of talent is 9 wins. Like this is a team that should be able to go out and win 9 of 12 games this next fall.
Yeah, it would
based
be
off of what I'm looking at on the 2 deep of talent.
Yeah, it would be disappointing. It would, I mean, more than disappointing to only win 8 games. I understand, like we talked about before, I think baked into that is the Clemson game off rip where you'll be slight underdogs on the road. That's like that's a game that most teams don't have. So when you're looking at I think Alabama plays Florida State this year, and like, oh, why is Alabama at 9 or 9.5 wins? They don't have that half game, where they're going to be underdogs in the non-conference there. So, but it is interesting because last year, and I was thinking about this last year, before the season, I was like, man, you look at the schedule. I thought the schedule was really favorable, which I think it was, even though maybe a couple ended up being a little tougher than we expected. This year, the schedule looks really hard. But I think I'm tired of going into seasons being like, oh, well, the schedule, if it plays out, I think if LSU plays to the standard that it needs to play at, and that if these transfer additions work out, I don't really care about the schedule, because if this all
No.
works out, they'll beat Florida at home. You play Ole Miss on the road, you play South Carolina at home. Like, it's a tough schedule,
Well,
and I think
the
that's
reality is
why.
I was about to use like basketball and Vandy basketball as an example, like Bruce Pearl did, but then I realized Vandy did that in football. Like you would look at a schedule and see Vandy's, well, that's a win. But then all of a sudden, oh, I didn't realize Vandy was going to go out and beat Bama and everyone else. And now, that's a real game.
Yeah. So it's
Or you look at OU and say like, oh, that's a tough one at the end of the year. And they're like, okay, well, they've had everybody out all year and played
yeah.
quarterback roulette back and forth,
Yeah, this is much more about LSU. Like, this is last year, we can agree, no matter what the schedule was, they underachieved and they underperformed. This year, if they go in and if Nick Anderson, Barry Brown, Josh Thompson, Braylon Moore, like all these guys that they added, if they live up to expectations and the returners obviously improve as well, I don't care who's on the schedule. They're going to win 10 games. But when you look at a Vegas total, there's a lot of uncertainty, and then you add in the strength of schedule metric, which, is going to be tough no matter what when you're in the SEC and have Clemson as a non-con game. So,
And Bama was Vegas put a lot of teams in the SEC at that 8.5 range.
I mean,
And
Florida was
I'm
six
sure
and a
you'll
half.
see where the bidding is. A&M was lower than LSU was, so
Yeah, Florida was 6.5. A&M was somewhere like what,
we'll see
seven
how
and
the
a half.
money comes in. We'll see if
Yeah,
anyone gets adjusted. But eight and a
very
half,
little.
we'll see. But as I said, is it? Yes, of course they could win only 8 games in the regular season. But I think, as you said, that would be a massive letdown for how good this team is and getting a quarterback like Nussmeier back. You mentioned like going on the road, Clemson week 1. That doesn't seem as daunting as it would if Nussmeier didn't
Oh,
have 2 bowl games and a whole season of football
yeah,
under his belt. Like
yeah,
he went into this past year with, he's started 1 game ever. It was that bowl game. Like, yeah, it was a great game. He came down, they won it at the end with Wisconsin, but it's 1 game. Now he's been to South Carolina when he's getting thrown around and wrecked by excellent defensive ends and pass rushers in a defense and making bad decisions and having to bounce back from it. So like get it all out of your system type thing. And we saw, again, I'm not saying he's Burrow, I'm not saying he's Daniels. I'm saying all those guys, as from year 1 starting to year 2 starting, were totally different players.
yeah,
And I don't know if Nussmeier will be a totally different player, but I certainly think that he's going to hone in on, terrible mistakes like
yeah. The
here and there that he
A&M.
can have. Yeah, A&M, but
Mhm.
certainly still have that same moxie that we saw this year, where when he uncorks some of these, you're like, nobody else in football can do that. I mean, a couple guys out there can make the throws that he can make.
Yeah, I mean, he was what, fourth or fifth in the country in pass attempts for the season as a first year as a
Well, they couldn't
starter.
run it, but then they found out they
Incredible.
could at some point.
No,
I think I think they'll be good at running back next year, though. They'll be fine.
the Brian Kelly also talked about. I think someone asked him about the spring portal and if there was any expectation going into it. And we have months to talk about the spring portal window. We got to talk about spring football first, but I did think it was interesting his answer to saying we're gonna just wait and see how the spring plays out. Basically, is what he said,
Yeah.
and then we'll go from there. But I think he kind of reinstated as like, we did all of our work, we did all the hard work. Now it's all right, do we absolutely need a fill in the blank spot here? And if we do, then all right, we'll see how much money we got and we'll go back to the portal.
Yeah, and I think too, you look at a guy like a top 5 safety a year ago coming out of high school in Denham Springs, and Deshaun Spears, and he got his feet wet this year, playing some, I think he had more than 100 snaps on the
Mm-hmm.
year. So certainly significant playing time for a true freshman backup, where the starters were all veterans and basically got to play every snap. He still got in there. In 3 months' time, does he go through spring ball and these workouts and everything, and all of a sudden you're like, well, he's actually better than options A, B, and C in the portal at safety. Let's just ride him and develop him, and that's
Yeah.
just the route we go. I could see that. Does Toviano look really good at safety and match that from the bowl game practices to spring, where they're like, that's his natural position. This is going to work out. He's going to start. Now we've got Cooley, you got Gilbert, you can bring along guys like Spears. So you can look at the room. It's just like corner on paper and say, oh man, I could count their starts and be like, man, that's a not a very, you're not that experienced, but at the same
Yep.
time, really talented. And it's safety. It's kind of like that. It's got unknowns to it, but if those unknowns work out, like if Cooley's a great player, if Gilbert, who played with a broken shoulder and hand last year, is a much more sure tackler when he's not wearing a shoulder brace and a club on his wrist. And does Toviano make an impact? All these things I think would play into. Does
Then
Spears really make a jump from year one to year two of how aggressive they'll be of, oh, we really need a safety, or like we're good type of thing?
yeah, and then also how ready are some of the freshmen, right? That we talked about it earlier. It's like, can even if Carrius Kearns is not and Solomon Thomas aren't starters, can they be competitive in the two deep?
I
And
think both will be battling for starts in the O line.
yeah, so if they live up to that, then it's like, okay, we're like the two deep on the offensive line is fine then. Can you go down a list of like linebackers, right? Ross, Weeks, Breaker, Moses, like they're gonna be competing to be in the two deep or around there. So you look at different spots. I mean, running back, right? Barry and Lindsay, I have them in the 2-3 deep
Yeah,
right
you're
now.
playing three
Getting
deep at running
yeah.
back at least.
Yeah. So it's like
You play.
how many of those freshmen are actually ready? And I think you have, what was it, 15 or so practices in the spring to evaluate that, and then you kind of see what happens from there. But I think they're just in a much better spot than they were last year. I remember going to the spring last year and being like, all right, well, they added some transfers, but they're not really like high level transfers, and so they can kind of work out, and the freshmen can do some stuff. But it was pretty clear, even going in, it was like they're gonna have to add more talent after spring practices last year. This year, I don't feel that way. This year, it's like, I mean, they could take another offensive lineman, but it's kind of a luxury at this point instead of like a necessity.
You want to do a quick ad read, a little My
Yeah.
Perfect Franchise? You guys know it. We talk about it every week for 2 years now, but Andy Luedecke at My Perfect Franchise is your guy to go to if you're kind of starting to get. And I talked to Andy this week, actually. We hopped on a Zoom together and we talked for a while, and he laid it out. He's gotten a good amount of business from the Bengal Tiger, good amount of business from On3 in different spots. And kind of the message you wanted to pass along was, hey, look, I'm getting calls now on everything from AI to how all these different things are going to change and the landscape of business and kind of where they take businesses. And whether it's just like he's a franchise owner, he's been a franchisee, now he's done consultant, been a franchise consultant for decades. And he said, look, I've been reading nonstop. I've gone to multiple conferences trying to track all of the latest trends and where things are going. And he's gotten now so many calls that he said right now, like the health and beauty side of things is booming off of social. And a lot of people are wondering, hey, how do I take that and make it into something bigger? Are these different companies franchising? It's free to call them, 404-973-9901. That's 404-973-9901. Obviously, Andy is his name, Andy, but Andy at myperfectfranchise.net. You can email him, and it's free. And then he explained it. It's free not just to call once. It's free the whole time. He'll never, Andy, you will never have to pay money to him. He will get you kind of on the route. And then when you decide exactly what you want to do, you'll go through some training with that company. And then if that company ends up working out with you for both sides and you become a franchisee or you get involved in some level, that company is the one who deals with My Perfect Franchise. So giving Andy a call is free, and then he just walks you through everything. So never pay a dime to him. And we can tease it. He said he will make it official here soon with kind of a release, but he's now each new member he gets that's from anywhere on three, he will or each business he is able to bring to anyone that comes from on three, he's going to kick back a portion of that to the NIL collective at that school. So
Oh,
and he really has a focus on baseball. He's a massive baseball fan,
perfect.
and I'll spoil this. He's a Longhorns fan, so I
Mm.
did ask him. I'm going to announce that a Longhorns fan is going to be funding LSU's baseball NIL because he talked a lot about how baseball just doesn't, A few $1,000 could mean a lot to a baseball player
Yeah.
who isn't getting a full scholarship from the
Mhm.
start, let alone maybe any NIL deals, and
Yeah.
that could carry them through paying rent and everything else, or getting, a car loan, whatever it might be. So he was wanting to pump up the baseball kids, softball around the country. So he's willing. He said, "Look," I said, "I'm going to bring it up if LSU wins a national championship over Texas," and then say that, yeah, well, one of the Longhorns' biggest fans was funding LSU's baseball NIL department, Andy Luedecke. But he said, "Hey, if it helps out the good LSU folks, then he's for it." But we'll have more on that. But moving forward, that is the 2025 promise from Andy is that he'll settle on a number with everybody and kick that amount back into your baseball NIL program.
There
Which
you go.
good news. I told him LSU fans may just be all out, and now every call he gets is an LSU fan and telling him to kick the money back.
It's baseball season,
Uh,
baby.
it is
Do
coming
it.
up very quickly here. Okay, so you brought up receiver, and we kind of glossed over it. You mentioned Nick Anderson. BK, Brian Kelly today, didn't go in depth on any, like, he was just like, the receiver room, super talented.
Yeah.
I know, look, Destin Hill's a kid who hasn't been able to consistently be on a football field for a number of years, but coming out of Edna Carr, he was tremendous. And he went to Florida State, and they stuck with him. Norvell stuck with him all the way. Now he transfers back home. There's some unknown there, but I'm high on Destin Hill. I think he could surprise some folks. We'll see. You play with house money right here. I mean, getting Destin Hill out of high school would have been a grab. You see where he's at now, and maybe he's able to help you. But Nick Anderson and Barry and Brown, like, I think about the guys you were speaking about, Tamarcus Cooley. He played at NC State. Brian Kelly loves Mansour Delane. He played at Virginia Tech. There's going to be a jump in competition for these guys. Now, they played some good competition, obviously, but week to week, you're in the SEC now. Bauer Sharp was in the SEC already, the tight end we've been talking about. You look at the receiver room. Yes, Nick Anderson was hurt, but he was at OU this past year, and he was a high-level five-star coming out of high school playing high-level competition in Texas. Then you look at Barry and Brown. He's been tearing it up since Will Levis was at Kentucky. So, like, and he's on, like, not a good team. Like, he's playing people every week that are usually better than his team. There shouldn't be that jump. I look at this receiver and look, knock on wood, a healthy
Yeah.
Chris Hilton is almost fits in that camp of, like, I don't think people understand how big Nuss coming back is. I don't think people even are putting thought into Harold Perkins is on this team and back. Like, then I get into that. I get into that third thing of, and people forget about Chris Hilton. Chris Hilton go out in a bowl game and get you 2 touchdowns and 110 yards on 2 throws easily. Now you've got Barry and Brown, and you've got Nick Anderson, and you're bringing back Aaron Anderson and Xavier Thomas, and 2 guys who proved themselves a year ago. Certainly, Aaron broke out more so than he had at any point in college. Xavier's consistently played a lot of football between State and LSU. I love this receiver room. Like, if Nick Anderson and Barry and Brown pan out, and Destin Hill's giving you something, this is the best receiver room in the SEC.
Yeah. This is, and I
They're
think,
like yard after catch nightmares,
yeah,
too.
no, this it's terrifying. And Brian Kelly said in his press conference, one of the things he did say about the receiver room was like, yeah, the speeds that were reported and everything that everyone that's floating around and everything are accurate. We can
Yeah.
back that up now with the catapult system and GPS tracking and everything like that. Like, it is all very, very legit.
Yeah.
And so,
Jelani Watkins is in that room. I think he will break 10 flat running track for LSU. He debuted his indoor. So I think he ran the 60 and all that this past weekend. But, whoo,
incredible. Like,
that
yeah, this
speed
is,
for days.
and that's what, it's just so stark comparing where they were last year without Hilton, and saying, all right, they have like good receivers, Kyron Lacey, they have CJ Daniels, Kyle Parker, and Xavier Thomas and Aaron Anderson. Like, they're good players, but they don't have that top end speed that really made defenses help to one side or play really off coverage. Like, they weren't scared in that way of the LSU's receivers. Not to say they were bad, but they just weren't afraid of their over the top ability. You put Chris Hilton in there for, like, he wasn't great in the first couple games when he was getting his feet back, but in the last 2 games, you see what happens when you just have that speed, and it's like, all right, Nussmeier can just crank some 40-yard, 50-yard throws, and it changes the game completely. Well, now you have Chris Hilton healthy again, knock on wood, stay healthy. Barian Brown, and even if Nick Anderson's not a burner at that level, he is still a big play receiver. If you go back and watch the Oklahoma games where he's averaging 20 yards a reception. So now you have 3 big play receivers there at the very least. And it completely changes the dynamics of this offense. It makes life so much easier. And even though I think Trades Green is going to have a strong year, like they don't need him to directly replace Mason Taylor's production now. Mason Taylor was the second leading receiver on the team. They don't need that anymore, or third leading receiver on the team. They don't need that anymore. Right? They have big play receivers on the perimeter, and that's going to make life so much easier for Garrett Nussmeier. So, like you said, I'm very, very, very excited for this wide receiver room going into the year. Yeah, Barry and Brown, all them.
Imagine how easy it's going to be for Nuss to, like, Mason Taylor was his best friend, like tight end wise, and we saw Trades Green break out with a couple touchdowns in the bowl game, and Bauer Sharp coming in, he gives you that safety valve. You've got Caden Durham. Like Caden Durham caught 30 balls this year, nearly 30 balls this year, I would say. Harlem Berry is Caden Durham on another level when it comes
As a
to
receiver.
pass catching. And
Yeah.
now I will say Harlem Berry is one of the fastest. He is probably top 3 or 4 fastest running backs in the country. So is Caden Durham. Like in this class, I meant, like, so is Caden Durham in his class. Caden Durham was running 10.4s in high school. But Harlem is that smaller, shiftier type where Caden is kind of a north-south by and large, at least at Duncanville. Then all of a sudden he showed us, he was one cut at Duncanville. Then this year he's out there to the edge, juking people, running them over, spin moving people. But I mean, just dump it off to Harlem and let him go grab you 10, 12 yards. I think this offense has so many weapons, pass catching wise, that it'll be good to see.
And go ahead.
No, I was looking up and down at the portal list.
I was going to ask about, do you want to talk about Atkins real quick?
Yeah, well, then I mentioned before we leave the portal talk, and we'll close it out. And then I'll mention one thing to you about Trades Green, because he was asked about playing basketball and if that stunts his growth or anything like that. And I wanted your take, but we didn't even talk about Patrick Payton. This is a guy 2 years ago that, playing opposite Jared Verse at FSU, he was one of the best college football players out there at D end, and now he's on your roster. So that's how deep this portal class goes on both sides of the ball. That we didn't even talk about the backup. Like if Nuss gets hurt for a game, now Michael Van Buren's going in. Like he was Mississippi State's starter last year and is a dual threat guy, which means you can also bring him in other spots if you want to, because Nuss isn't going to run it, obviously. So love the portal class. Thought they were aggressive, and really Brian Kelly talked about, and it's Austin Thomas being here as kind of a GM role, but them being organized, them being aggressive, and them having the ability to go out, raise the funding that they needed. He talked about his $1 million match. And when they got all that with NIL, they signed a very good high school class, and then they just crushed the portal. And then they retained players. That's NIL too. So I think across the board, LSU's NIL, by and large, is the best spot it's ever been in. But maybe most importantly, actually, is organized and has real direction football-wise. And it showed, right? I mean, you don't sign the class they did and those players, and you certainly don't get the portal class they did and those players without a pretty healthy kind of plan and then budget to back it up on the NIL side.
Exactly. This is, I don't think people understand there was so much urgency when Brian Kelly talked about on signing day being like, hey, we need to step up. Like we need to step up financially, and I'll do everything I can. We need to do everything we can. And I think the portal results are the first real tangible signs of that. And that's going to be significant, not just for this year, but for years to come. I think there is now a collective buy-in and a collective understanding of what it takes to play this game at a high level. And so that's huge. And I'm really glad Brian Kelly came out and said that on signing day and made it a point of emphasis. Hey, no, this isn't good enough. Yeah. And so if we're going to play with Texas and all these other big schools, Oregon, Ohio States, we need to step it up in this way. And I think the response has been even more than what he imagined to this point. So that's huge for LSU.
And look at DJ Pickett, 5-star number 1 corner. They beat out Oregon and Miami, 2 schools that are known for having the deepest pocketbooks out there when it comes to NIL. So, hey, I don't think DJ Pickett's coming for free, but I do think development and having Corey Raymond back is something that kind of helps push LSU over the edge. And that's credit to LSU, Brian Kelly, for saying, all right, I let Corey Raymond walk. I hired someone else. I made the decision to let that person go, and I went back and I hired Corey, and now they're kind of back on track. So I think all of this speaks to me that Kelly certainly is like, hey, look, put everyone in the right place, everyone do your jobs, different, run the program in these different ways. I want to win a championship. What's it going to have to take to get there? And then he's come through with it.
Yeah. The $1 million match, he said they reached
Alex,
their
yeah,
goal.
Alex Atkins going out and hiring someone who Florida State sucked this year. They were like 1-12, but going into this year, he was considered like the hot up and comer. He was nabbing top O linemen for Florida State. They cleaned up
Yeah.
in the portal. And now Solomon Thomas, who LSU flipped from Florida State, 5-star, basically came out and said, I'm not going to Florida State anymore because Alex Atkins isn't the coach. And that's a kid that's from Florida that was like, I've wanted to play at Florida State my whole life, but that was my guy. And he's not there. He got let go. And lo and behold, 2 months later, LSU hires him. So Solomon gets his wish. He's back with Alex Atkins. But Matty B, run game coordinator, obviously he's got O-line experience. He'll be the tight ends coach. And I think it gives you, too, one of those things, maybe it's multi-layered, but what if Brad Davis moves on and has an NFL job one day? Or what, then you've got a guy like Alex Atkins. What if a few years it would, Joe Sloan moves on one day? Are you guys like Alex Atkins will get looks like this is how people move up. So
Yep.
I don't know your take on the hire. I don't know him personally. Everybody that I've talked to at FSU has said that he's great, that excellent recruiter. The players all love him. To me, this seemed like it was a name getting thrown around that was like, okay, yeah, like if that works out, sure. It's like the whole like Caleb Downs leaving Ohio State joke of like, when's he going in the portal again?
Right.
This was like, yeah, of course, yeah, hire Alex Atkins for tight ends coach, yeah. Mm-hmm. Then it happened. It was like, oh damn, all right, LSU's really not messing around.
Yeah, I think you laid it out well. Anytime you can add a high-end offensive mind like this, and which I do consider Atkins to be. I mean, the offensive coordinator for Florida State the past 3 years, and was the offensive line coach for 2 years before that. I think the recruiting chops have shown on the offensive line over the past 5 years at FSU. We know it was Solomon Thomas. We know those connections in Florida. A lot of people will stick on the run game coordinator part, which is obviously significant because of LSU's shortcomings in the run game last year. I think the tight end coach, I think that might be overviewed because people just assume like, oh, Trey'Dez Green, they have a couple transfers, it'll be a good group. I think if Alex Atkins can help Green, Sharp, Donovan Green as well, and all
JD
them,
LaFleur.
yeah, JD LaFleur, if he can help them as blockers, I think that is massive for this team because we talked about it like Trey'Dez and Bauer and Donovan, they're not like great blockers at this point in their careers. If they can take a step forward, a meaningful step forward as blockers and just understanding leverage and different techniques and being used in different run game situations, which he will be in control of, or at least have contributions to, Alex Atkins will, that will go a long way in helping the run game because you just look at the first couple games of last year, it was like you watch the tape, it's like, oh, Trey'Dez Green and Kamori and Pimpton can't block. Like
No,
it's just
and we
flat
know
out.
Brian Kelly wants to be 12 personnel. Like, remember when he got here? It's like
So they had to
12
just,
personnel, all that. Now their extra tight end was just another O lineman. That gives
yeah.
you no threat to throw. Bo Bordelon is blocking right now. Like,
Yeah, so it was like they had to just scrap it. They went strictly like 11, unless if Borderline came in the game. It just really made them one-dimensional, I think, in a lot of situations. Now, if you can get that dimension back, I think that would be huge for this team. So I think the tight end aspect of this is significant. And then you get to the run game part where if you go watch his games, I mean, it was a lot of counter, man. GT
mhm.
counter, all this stuff, everything. And I know people want to diversify the run game. Honestly, I thought he simplified it, and I thought they were just really good. If you go back to the 2023 season where they had Trey Benson in that group, I thought it was really simplified, and they executed the heck out of it. So I love this hire, and I think this is about as big of a splash as you can make at tight ends coach.
It completes the on-field staff. So
Yes.
you've got real continuity. That was your only loss was a guy who, in Nagel, got a promotion by Willie Fritz, where he had come from Tulane under Fritz, coached for a year as tight ends coach at LSU, and now Lake Charles native makes his way past Lake Charles over to Houston and will be the OC for Willie Fritz. So a big hire, certainly, to replace a guy like Nagel, who was viewed as, hey, look, this is a guy who's called plays before and will call plays again. When he's kind of in and out at the door quickly, replacing with Atkins is big. Before we get out, any quick thoughts on Trey Dez?
Oh,
Brian Kelly
basketball.
was asked about
Right.
Trey Dez Green playing basketball and if like how that affects anything. And I don't know. Kelly said like basically like beyond we're getting in the weight room every day and like bringing down the conditioning. Beyond that, it's nothing that is that significant. Beyond it's like, hey, he's going to be exercise, he's running no matter what. Could he use that as time to bulk up? Maybe, but whatever.
First of all, the appeal of Trey Green is the fact that he is such an incredible athlete and moves the way he does at 6'7", right? Like that's the appeal of Trey Green. And the reason he is able to do that is because he's played basketball his whole life and because he moves that way. And you watch on the basketball court, he's not uncomfortable. Like he shuffles his feet. He can get up and down the court. He can cut really well. And that's what separates him from other big tight ends. Like I hate to, talk down on him, I guess, but like Kamorian Pimpton, that's what I always said the difference was between him and Pimpton was like you watch him break on his routes, he's moving like a basketball player, he's moving like a receiver, like he moves in that way, and that's what makes him special. He can go high point the ball like it's a rebound. He knows how to use his body in those ways. So on one hand, yes, I understand the want from LSU fans to bulk up and get stronger and develop it as a blocker because I think those are significant traits this coming season. But what makes him elite is what he's doing on the basketball court. Like the way he moves, the way he catches the ball, him as a receiver is what makes him elite. And that I think only strengthens or at least stays the same at the very least when he's transferring between the two sports. So I don't have a problem with it. I think college sports are supposed to be fun. We see football players play baseball all the time. This is just a phenomenal athlete doing what he does, man. This is
And
incredible.
let's not hide it. His first love's basketball. He's
Yes, he
said it
started
many
playing
times.
football, like, what, 5 years ago, 4
Yeah.
years ago, if that?
And I think
So
Matt McMahon and them even said, like, look, dude, if you're going to walk on to the basketball team here, you're getting, a few minutes a game. And he's like, sounds great. Like,
yeah,
I'm there.
yeah.
He's got
This
some
dude
Dion Waiters in him, too. He'll chunk it up from three until one falls. I don't think one has fallen yet,
I
but
don't think so.
he
He
can
had the
jump.
hey, he had the highlight of the season as far as I'm concerned on this team.
The
I mean, the
steal and the
block into the
lefty
dunk
dunk.
is all I ever need to see. I'm like, "Okay, he can do what he wants." That is an incredible athlete. Just
Yeah.
phenomenal, phenomenal athlete. Like, he can actually I mean, he had an offer from Louisiana Monroe early, I think as, like, a sophomore, and obviously, if he would've stuck with basketball, maybe he could have gotten some more, I'm not saying he would've got, like, high major, but he could have got more basketball offers, so this isn't like again, this isn't a scrub.
No, 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 no. He was very good in high school. He was a very good basketball
Like, this
player.
dude could play, and that's what made it so devastating his senior year is he couldn't play basketball as Zachary. He only played football, and that's why he fought that tooth and nail trying to
Well, and
get on the
now you
basketball.
see him roll out on the basketball court. All these dudes have been shooting in the gym every day,
Right?
nonstop. He's like, I just walked off the football field, scored a couple of touchdowns the ball game, and Nate Oates, what up? Here I am. Like that post game with Nate Oates is like, we knew going in like LSU's length was going to be an issue, and then they roll up with Trey Green on the bus, and 6'7" comes off. Another guy who's out here hands up. So I don't know. It's fun to watch. Like you said, it's
Incredible
supposed to be
athlete.
fun. So I like to. It's fun to watch.
Yeah, and I don't think there's a plan to do it as a sophomore, but, hey, as a freshman, go have fun, and
Hey, we're recording this at like 3:24. Maybe tonight in Athens, he goes and throws down a three, some dunks. Who knows?
I'm here for it. I'm here for it. All huge fan of Trey Green on the football field, on the basketball court, just everywhere.
Well,
Incredible athlete.
he's had like a great month. He scored 2 touchdowns to kick off the new year. Dunked in his first ever game on the road at Bama, which was what, like the number 2 team
Number
in the country at the
4, yeah.
time, 4 or something like that, top
Mhm.
5. Go
Yeah,
ahead, Trey Dez.
go ahead.
Have yourself a month,
Incredible.
2025. Maybe just have yourself a 2025. That way it can count towards next football season.
Yes, exactly. All right.
All right, I'm out.
That's all we got.
Anything else? Yeah, we're
That's
done.
all I got. That's it.
The portal class is elite.
Yes,
And
very excited.
everybody's here except Josh Thompson, who is the highest ranked portal guy they have, strangely enough. But he said that he gets here in March. So I guess coming from Northwestern, Jaden Daniels did the same thing. He came in March, right before spring ball started. So he'll be here for spring ball, which is what matters most.
Yeah, I love Josh Thompson.
I don't think coming from Northwestern to LSU, his credit should be an issue, but we'll see him in March.
Yes, we'll see Josh Thompson in March. We'll see all these guys in March, and we'll have previews out for spring football in the coming weeks as well to do all that. And then we'll have mailbag pods as well, answering any questions from subscribers in the month of February. So yeah, we thank you all for joining us. Leave us a like, comment, share, subscribe if you haven't already. Subscribe to the Bengal Tiger on 3.
$1.
$1. That's where we live at. That's where we spend a ton of our time at constantly. So for Shea Dixon, I'm
looking
Brune.
at the sub count right now, and we're down on the site 2 subs. So 2 of you are listening. Let your sub laps yesterday and didn't or actually, I'll see it tomorrow. So then if it's back up by tomorrow, I'll be fine. If not, 2 of you, you know who you are. Let your sub laps.
Oh Lord.
All right,
Thank you all for joining us. We will talk to y'all later.